Welcome to our Master Development Planning Committee meeting on October 23rd, 7:00 p.m. We are, I'm Amy Karras, I'm the chair of our committee. Maybe we could just go around, everyone say who they are, and then we'll move on. We have a short agenda and then a nice presentation from HKT.
I'm Janet Slamenda, principal from HKT Architects.
Great.
I'm Lance Hill. I'm with Park Corporation. We're part of HKT's team.
I'm Frank Twist, member of the committee.
I'm Annie Wilton, a member of the committee.
I'm Tom Shank, a member of the committee.
George Stout, committee member.
Bill Renault, member of the committee.
Ken Luciak, member of the committee.
Bill Hammer, principal at HKT Architects.
David Pollack, principal at Abacus Architects and part of the HKT team.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So we did have 4 sets of meeting minutes just to go through. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? I did email Andy with one small correction for the June 4th one, is that I wasn't there. So I just asked him to take me off and to put Annie down as the chair for that meeting. But otherwise, were there any other corrections anybody noticed?
Nope.
Okay, so then if someone wants to make a motion to approve all 4 minutes, meeting minutes?
I'll make that motion with the,
Okay, for the
Just
4th, the
amendment.
12th, the 20th, and the 24th?
yep.
Yep, I'll second it.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Okay, awesome. The second agenda item was any discussion of feedback from our public input session on October 7th? Crickets?
I thought it was very good. I mean, there was a lot of input.
Great.
No, it was good. It was well attended. I'd like to see all the folks from town there, gathering their valuable input as well as the input we'll be able to provide during the process. But yeah, it was a great meeting.
I thought it was really interesting how so many people were so focused on the land more than the specifics of the buildings and just how important that is for our town.
I noticed a lot of the abutters were very concerned about that,
Yeah.
but even with prodding, apparently none of them volunteered to join our committee, so I'm a little disappointed at that.
There were 3 people that left their names on cards,
Oh, good.
Okay.
and I don't know who they were. I mean, I personally don't know them, but I
Who
sent
have their
those names
names?
on to Andy.
Does Andy have their names?
Pardon me?
Does Andy have their names?
Yes, I sent them on to
Okay.
Andy. I included them in my minutes of the meeting,
Okay.
but I didn't publish their names because I didn't know what was proper to do, so I just sent the names on to Andy, so he has, I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? No? Okay, then we will move on to the large portion of our meeting, which we're all excited for, your presentation.
Bill, do you have anything you want to say? Do you just want me to launch into this?
Well, I was just going to say this, going back to our schedule, this was the portion, we had 7 phases on this, and this phase was primarily gathering data. And we're here to really present to you all what we have found, both in terms of site evaluation and building evaluation, which Janet will go into the buildings, and then we'll, at the very end, talk about the next steps. So, Janet, take it away.
All right, so what we completed with the individual end users of the site was our programming process. We sent them a questionnaire that they filled out, not very long, maybe 8 pages long. Everybody did a really great job sharing every detail they could about their departments. After that meeting, I met with them, the individual people, fire chief, police chief, several people dropped in from the departments along the way and added their conversations. I met with everyone in town hall. And then on a conference call, we met and talked to Andy and some folks about the potential of a community building. So we did all that. Then I produced program summaries for each of those spaces, and most of them have been reviewed on a very beginning level by the end users. I've gotten some comments back. They are still in draft forms. And the other thing that was talked about along the way is programming for a site use. What I've talked about both times that we've met so far, we've talked about that fifth element of the site being in and of itself a programming, an important thing to talk about. I'm going to hand out to the committee members the summary documents that I'll be talking about. These are the details. I'll be summarizing the information for you. And these are still in draft
Thank you.
form, so you have to remember that. When we do these things, we tend to be, we don't try to be very too conservative when we're working out the numbers. We base the square footage numbers based on not what the departments ask for. It's like a physical space that, don't ask for 12 by 14 space. Tell me what you do in the space, and I'll tell you what you need to provide, and that way it keeps everybody very honest about it. We use all the other fire and police stations, town halls, community centers that we've worked on in the past to come up with the square footages, and then we put that all together and come up with these documents. So the first one we did was the fire department, and for those of you who go to the fire department every day, or those of you who have visited a few times, the building is obviously, it's an older building. It's filled to capacity, beyond capacity. In fact, they have vehicles outside the building in tents. There's no space essentially here between vehicles in the structure and the roof. Or the door openings, and so everything is really packed in. When we met doing it, we had to sit in this room because it was the only room with more than 2 chairs. So we met there and talked, and that's their point of service answering. This is the way they move up and down. So the second floor space has a lot of the space for people to work, and when a fire call in, they run down a spiral stair, not the most efficient way of getting down in the building. All their gear sits out on the apparatus floor, which is not how you store gear anymore. And this is their lounge space, and that's a bed in that room. So that's where someone has to sleep sometimes. So it's past its prime a bit. And when we programmed, we talked about it as these 3 general spaces for the fire department: administration, staff support, and operations. So under that administration category were all the offices, fire prevention, conference rooms, supply, copy, archive, document storage. There were a lot of other spaces which you have on your detail here. And that came out of 2,336 square feet of space. And those are gross numbers. So, by the way, when you see this, there's a subtotal on your page. On your very first page, it says 1,625 square feet, and then we do gross area adjustments. That takes account of walls and corridors and things like that. We adjust those percentages depending on the space. Fire departments, police departments are made up of a lot of small rooms, so there's a lot of walls, more walls than a room like this, or a community space. You'll see that they're adjusted for the community space. So then the staff support space includes day rooms and kitchens, dorm rooms, locker rooms, toilets, showers, and report writing. That's 3,945. And then the biggest space in any fire department, of course, is the operation area where the apparatus space are. And of that 14,000 square feet, 10,300 of that is the apparatus space, and to support their trucks and their equipment in a modern way. And that also includes things like their hose and gear storage, their laundry, their workshops, medical decontamination spaces, triage, medical supplies, SCBA, oxygen, hazmat supplies, and maintenance. There's a lot of things that support a fire department, things they have to do: gear washers, dehydrators to clean their gear, and so that's worth that. So that's a total of 20,379 square feet, and that's without any of the shared space, no lobbies, no community training rooms, things like that. And we also came up with 23 parking spaces for the fire department. And like any public safety building, when staff changes, at a public safety building, when staff changes, the one staff doesn't leave at 3, and the other come in at 3:30. They overlap, and so you always have to have parking for cars for both staff changes. So in the police department, we pick the 2 highest amount of people leaving. Whatever shifts have the highest amount, we count those up, and then that's how we do it. So there were 23 parking spaces. We haven't talked a lot about the parking, whether that's a good number, but it's what I thought I heard. So that's the fire department. Did anybody have any questions about fire? You can look at the detail. And oh, by the way, the other thing about this is we are projecting 20 years out. So these are projected numbers. We're not building for how many staff they have today. And I have the detail from the departments of their projections for staff going out 20 years. So these are based on 20 years out. So you might say, why do I need a deputy chief office? Well, you don't have one now, but you probably will have one in that, the plan is to have one in that 20-year timeframe. Same things with the captain's office. You know, you have one currently, and for the future, that is very common, especially in fire departments, to see that they'll have a staffing change over that period, how they organize their staff, especially people that have, not in this case, but people have gone from a primarily call and small professional staff to full-time, where, you know, they have a whole different structure. So the chief, if anybody has any questions for the chief on the details, I can provide that to you.
I
So-
have a question.
yeah.
What is, just as an idea for a layperson, what is our current square foot?
I don't have that with me.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I will get that, though.
All right, do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's,
Do you know how much you
It's-
have now?
Just
It's
from a
less than half.
perspective. Less than half?
oh,
Okay.
yeah, much
Oh,
less than
yeah.
half.
I mean, you know, that's a dorm room, by the way. You know, typical dorm room under the eave. And the ones we're doing are not much bigger, but where they're organized differently. So if there's multiple shifts, and you have 4 shifts, correct? So a room will have should have 4 lockers for their bed linens. They don't share bed linens, they have their own bed linens. They don't want to have to take them home, they store them in a locker. And then in this particular case, so that room would have that and those 4 lockers. And then we talked about how to store all their gear and their clothing and their uniforms. And so what we're seeing a model to going to more is to have a common locker room with lockers with their clothes, and then individual bathrooms. It helps with the male-female ratios. It helps, you know, used to have only males, so you didn't worry about it. Everybody was in the same room. Now you have male-female. So we tended to see the split and having sort of small bathrooms with a shower, a sink, and a toilet, sort of like a home, and then having the rooms. And in this particular case, we have 4 single rooms and 2 double rooms. So we're accounting for 8 staff members and 2 officers, so a total of 10, and that's the plan for the future. So, and then the rest of it, does that help? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't even seen the whole inside, so it's nice to see
Yeah.
what it is and what we need.
Yeah, I think, you know, tours of the buildings would be really helpful for everybody to see what it is, you know, where they're working. I mean, I have a lot of pictures. This is just gives you an idea of the kind of, you know, circumstances they're working in. I've never seen a spiral stair in a fire department if we're getting down from the top floor. I mean, there was a call when I was there, and I'll run down the spiral stairs. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Gear used to be out in the floor, but, you know, the ultraviolet light and the air quality in those spaces, that we don't do that anymore. There's a real move now to have really hot and cold zones, because people used to track in their contaminated gear into the space and then traveled all through the building. So now we're laying out plans where we're providing spaces that you can go into, get out of that gear, get that gear into the washers, and move it progressively into cleaner spaces so that you're not tracking it. And that's becoming quite the, it's the thing that a lot of fire officers are focusing on, you know, their general health and safety in these buildings. So that's the fire. This is the police department. You know, this building was not, you know, this building was brought from another town as a surplus building. And then a trailer, you know, a temporary building was added to it to make up a building. And so, you know, they do what they have. This is their meeting space on the second floor, and they've trained a lot of people in here. It's not accessible. So, you know, that's a problem, you know, and, you know, cell blocks cells that barely, if they do, the Department of Public Health expects them every year. You know, they don't necessarily meet, they barely squeak by. So, you know, we're looking at that. You know, they're just buildings perhaps past their prime, you know, lockers, you know, in with evidence and with, you know, all these things layered on top of each other because they live where they have to. This is, these are the totals for the police department. This is split into 4 main sections. Administration, operations, and staff support, and then the addition of the detention group. So officer in the administration includes officers and detectives, interviews, the lab, prosecutors, conference, supplies, and archive document storage, 3,025 square feet. And then in the operations, you have your sergeants, your officers, shared workspace, squad room, report writing, IT, evidence, and armory, and 2,583 square feet. You have staff support, includes lunch break rooms, toilet, shower, locker rooms, 2,163 square feet. And then the detention block, which includes the Sallyport impound and vehicle bays, bulk evidence, recovered property, booking, cells, and interrogation at 4,445. Sallyports now have to not just fit a squad car, but have to fit an ambulance, so that they are bigger than they used to be. And the cells have to be accessible, not every cell, but a percentage. So there's, you know, there's changes, things have gotten bigger in that case too. And that came out to 12,216 square feet. That's total without shared space as well. They also requested a carport for police vehicles. If they leave their cars running when they're at the station and in the snow, this keeps them clean and out of the weather. And then that's parking for 43 vehicles, and that includes their personal vehicles as well as their police vehicles. Same concept of overlapping shifts. So that's that building right there. Anybody have any questions about the police? I know the police chief isn't here, so I can't look to him, but does anybody have anything about that?
All the parking spaces are non-covered.
Pardon me?
All the parking spaces are not covered.
They're not.
Not covered.
Oh, not covered, no. These are, just the carport was that was a parking for 10 vehicles, and that's primarily the working vehicles that, you know, people coming and going. So that, we've been putting those in if we can get them in, and it's literally a carport. It's open on 3 sides. It's got a roof, and sometimes it's powered so that they can keep the vehicles running and charged, especially in inclement weather. It's, you know, it's, seems perhaps we're seeing it more and more being asked for. You know, again, it's in the program right now, and, you know, be part of, you actually have enough site for it. Oftentimes it's a site issue, but, you know, and the cost is less costly to build certainly than a building or you know, because you're not providing any mechanical systems other than some power. And then things like, there's, you know, the difference between bulk evidence, recovered property, and then the actual evidence rooms. You know, you get bulk evidence, you can get anything, a keg, an alarm, or anything that's big, and it's under lock and key, but it's kept in the bays. Whereas the other evidence rooms is made up of several different spaces where they process evidence, where the officer takes it in, there's lockers, and then within that room, there are spaces for instance, narcotics and jewelry and things like that, subdivided spaces. So, nothing in either departments was unusual. Everything was very standard to the industry. Every fire and police department is different, though, but, you know, so that's that.
Yeah, just so I don't drive myself crazy, we don't have all of these pages in this packet.
You don't have all the what?
Pages? I don't see that page in
Oh,
my
those
packet.
pages?
Yeah,
You don't have the summary of the police department
or the fire department.
on the second of the fire department?
Oh,
You don't have a 2-sided thing that gives up 20,379 square feet?
It's just expanded more, is all, yeah.
okay.
Do you have it?
I guess I do, but it's not in that form.
Oh, it's not in that form, no, because these are summaries, like, I didn't give you I gave you the breakdowns, I didn't put all the breakdowns
Okay.
on the screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because it's long and detailed, and this includes every toilet room, every coat closet, every kitchenette, the details of the square footage, whereas this is just a summary. So that's fire. And so they're two-sided pages, of course, so,
And then just again, the gross area adjustment, 15%, and the circulation adjustment of 25%.
Right.
Just refresh me with that.
okay, so you have the net numbers is from this wall to this wall, the inside of the room. The gross numbers account for the thickness of the walls, the
Okay.
width of the corridors, all those things. So when we work to the 12,216 number, it would be like if you put a big square on the thing and everything had to fit inside. All
Okay.
the exterior walls, interior walls, corridors, everything else. In the next one, you'll see, which is the shared spaces, you see all the mechanical rooms. So you see there are no mechanical rooms in any of the individual spaces, because we were looking at, the committee asked, and I think it's the way to do it. You do the police separately, the fire separately, and then you show the shared. And then you can mix them any way you want. So, so the shared spaces include entry, lobby for walk-in visitors with a secure public interview room, a large community room used for the Emergency Operations Center, fire and police training, and a general community use, a kitchenette, and an office area for the EOC. That was 3,844 square feet. There's a secondary PSAP space in there, which is, sort of a dispatch or, point of answering for if there's calls, and there's always some backup. These are it's a backup space for the departments. I know the dispatch is off-site now. North Shore Regional does it, but these are backup. This is a backup space. Then there's a staff support space, a fitness room. And you saw in some of the pictures, the fitness room was in the locker room, and it was wherever it could be. And then 3,181 square feet of building support, which includes a server, mechanical rooms, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, janitors, and vertical circulation. So that comes up to 8,391. And we put 20 parking spaces for visitors. And there's a breakdown on your sheets. The police have 15 to 20 walk-ins per day, who are met by administrative secretaries. They have a video call system off hours to dispatch at regional center. They would like to have a lockdown arrangement as a safe haven, which we would highly recommend. That means that if someone's being chased and they go in, they can hit a panic button and the door's locked behind them. And then, then somebody can get to them. And then the fire department has 6 to 10 visitors a day, met by staff as they enter the apparatus space or wander into the building. So when I was there, a woman and her daughter came, who the fire department had responded to an emergency call at their house recently, or their father, I believe, a husband, and they were coming in to thank the officers, and they were just wandering through the apparatus space, and that's the way it works there. So, we'd be creating a centralized lobby with a lockdown space so that people can be serviced. And so that's that. So I know the next question you're going to ask, well, what happens if and this is not in your sheets, but if we combined the facilities, we took the police and the fire and the sheriff and put them together, that would total 40,986 square feet. And that would include 86 vehicles in the carport for the 10 cars for the police department. If you did a standalone fire station, you would do a smaller meeting room, used only for emergency operations center and the fire department training and general community use, but it would be much smaller, or 600 square feet or so smaller. That was a building of 26,714 square feet. And if you did a standalone police station somewhere down the line, that would also have a smaller meeting room used for police department training and general community use, and that the EOC would be already set at the fire department, so we didn't include that in there. And that's had 58 vehicles in the carport, and that was 18,683 square feet. So that's where the numbers stand right now. This is still, again, in draft form. You know, we're still working on this, but it's not going to be much different. I don't think, from the response I've gotten from the departments so far, I didn't miss anything big, and the few things I did miss that they pointed out were very small spaces, actually. A storage room for a particular thing was 64 square feet, things like that. There were no big rooms missing, and it seemed to capture the amount of people that they wanted to train, how many, you know, office spaces they needed, and there is a hierarchy of square footage of how big things are. So those are the totals as they stand today. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Frank?
Yeah, I just have one.
Yeah.
In your experience with police and fire buildings, have you spoken at all or done anything regarding the accommodations for the opening of the mail? Because of contaminated or white powder mail, so these buildings would not need
No,
to
we
be
have not.
evacuated?
This is the first time.
We had to, Chief and I had to contend with that at the correctional facility on 2 separate occasions, and we also talked about that at the new DYS facility. So, in the event of a white powder
Yeah.
letter, we had to evacuate a building
whole
at the
building.
correctional facility, so. The
Well-
second time it happened, they had an outbuilding that they used and there was no disruption, so. I was just curious if you've had any experience with that.
I haven't heard that yet, but that's, you know, what is our world coming to, sort of.
Right,
you know,
unfortunately.
But we have, and how did they handle that in the building that you were talking about? Did they?
At the correctional facility?
Yeah, so everything came into one space?
Right, they would open the mail in the administration building, and the day that they had a white powder letter, we had to evacuate the entire administration building. And that included the central control, right, Chief? That, you know, includes, you know, that's the brain of the
Yeah.
entire facility, so that was pretty disruptive. So they used an outbuilding, I think it was a shed they put in the perimeter, right? So they would open the mail in a shed, and they did have a second incident, and in that case, there was no interruption to the operation, it was isolated.
They were both on the same day? Is that what
No,
you mean?
no,
They were
different.
2 separate days?
Yeah.
That's the first for us, but we can think about whether it should be, the mail should be brought to a room that is dead-ended and
Right.
mechanically separated.
Yeah, just something to think
Yeah,
about, right?
yeah, we can do that. Doesn't have to be a very big room to do
Right.
that, you know.
Hmm.
Okay,
That's interesting.
anything else? Okay, so.
So,
Yes, sorry.
no one else's question. How would we decide, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, if we're looking at this as combined or shared space or separate?
Well, I mean, you can see that, you know, if you total up the 2 standalones, you're about 5,000, a little bit less square footage bigger by going to separate buildings, which of course is more costly. They're you know, you're duplicating all the mechanical systems, you're duplicating the training rooms, things like that. And, you know, ultimately, you know, how the departments interact with each other is important. I think, you know, from meeting them, and actually, this program, the shared space one before, I actually met with the 2 chiefs together. So I met with the police chief first, and the police chief and the fire chief, and I met together, and then I met with the fire department. So they were able to talk all this through. They debated, they talked about how they work, what works, what wouldn't work, sort of thing, and came up with a program that worked. And so, you know, I think that's important. And I think we have the space. One of the things I heard certainly from the police chief was that, you know, the police and fire departments are they run differently. A fire department is much more open, you know, there are a lot of tours, there are kids coming through. Police departments are really closed down, for good reason, closed down. And so there's a lot of question when the 2 buildings are joined, how they physically overlap spaces. You know, does that work for the police department as well? And, you know, there's a little bit more of a concern for that. In our particular site, we have more of an opportunity to create a split between the 2 and really put those shared spaces between them. And so the other option that you guys could think about is if you wanted to build the standalone fire station and the bigger shared spaces now and years later, add on and build the police station right adjacent to it. So you're
Well,
still getting
that was going to be
small-
my next question. So if we were to go that route,
Yeah.
what would we be looking to build for that standalone fire station? Because you've basically carved it off at 26. So what would that oversized shared space end up being?
Well, the standalone, I decreased, and you do have a copy of that in your, the shared
Oh, we
probably
do.
got
Okay.
smaller in here.
All right.
I downsized the fitness rooms, I downsized the training rooms, I took out, like, the police department doesn't have the ESC office anymore, so I kind of looked at all of those and made them all a little smaller. Mechanical spaces, I made a little bit smaller, they could get more.
Yeah, it's not my question. I'm saying,
Oh.
well, what if we were, what size building would we need to do if we were looking at a phased approach? So if we did our,
Well-
not as a standalone fire station, but with that, oversized shared
Phased,
space.
But together.
As a phase, you guys.
It would be the top number, it would be the 40. Because the 40 includes the 23 fire, entire shared, and then the entire police. So
But we wouldn't be building the police to start. That's what I'm just, so as
You
we're
would, build-
looking.
you would still, I think you'd still build the entire shared thing if they were gonna join
Yeah,
it.
you really almost have to,
Yeah.
because you can't
You wouldn't
add on to that. It would be difficult, let's put it that way, to add on to that without disrupting the fire station's operations. But if you had something that you could just connect onto, with a wall that you could ultimately open up for the
Right.
connection.
Sure.
So we would design those, common spaces as if that building was happening right away.
Okay.
And then we would just not build it. And from a mechanical point of view, I'd certainly talk to engineers about it, how much of that, whatever mechanical system would you build now, or would you put it all in? It depends on how long down the way it's gonna build, but you would certainly build the capacity and, in the planning to either be added on to, but you'd physically build the space right now.
Sure.
And then, whether, you filled it all up now or you add it on later. So, we'd have to work that out in detail, but, it would never get any bigger than that number.
Sure.
40,000.
So are you recommending, or did the police and fire come up with like what they would prefer? Did we get to that, Chief? Or no, we're not there yet? I could be. No comment yet, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Let's just say no one was opposed to joining, and no
Okay.
one was opposed to being on their own.
Okay,
I think Janet, the committee would want to present all their options first and then decide. I personally am open to, put my chief's hat on. This is the combination with the shared space is awesome. As a taxpayer, I'll take my taxpayer hat on, and it's gonna save money, and we have, like Jan says, we have the room. We're fortunate to have the room, and if we can do the shared facility, and build them both, I mean, it'd be great if we could build all four, but if we could build this facility, that would be huge. I mean, it's needed, obviously, for all four buildings, but I think with what Janet has presented and researched, she found, this would be the most cost-effective and most efficient item.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I'm
I didn't
sorry.
mean to either. I would say that when we do the next phase, which is the options of our internal work, we'll probably, and I'm speaking for Bill and Lance and David here, we'll look at them both ways for you.
Okay.
We'll plan for standalone buildings, and we'll plan for that combined building. I think, we have to, that makes perfect sense for us to explore all of those options for you, so that ultimately it's a decision, because it's money. But I don't, not surprisingly, the shared space didn't go down that much, you don't, I've had only one joint station that shared a conference room, down to a conference room, and that was it. I mean, the only, of their individual fire or police needs, that was the only other thing that they could share, and they did share it. And, we found a way of, they had a third floor administration space, they were on either end, and then they had a corridor between, and some common spaces are along that corridor. That was it. So there's just nothing a fire department really shares with the police department, They don't share staff, they do very different things. It's not like in a community building or a town hall, you could cross-train staff to work in different departments potentially, but you can't cross-train policemen to do fireman work,
Right.
sort of thing. So there's not a whole lot.
One of the budget points that
Yeah.
came up in our earlier meetings was sort of what you addressed. I understand that you probably can't build one standalone building and then add on to it. But what if you built the entire building, but the police department initially was just a shell?
Oh, yeah. do
And I
that.
think we need to understand that cost and
Okay.
what the incremental cost would be versus building it all at once. Because if I understand correctly, our first leader has said that we got a little bit of a budget problem. We wouldn't want to have to put a price tag on a combined building that was beyond the financial reach of one fiscal year or whatever, so.
Yeah, we
Well, I
can-
think you have to keep in mind, if you do that, you're not going to have a shell just sitting there empty. You're going to have to heat it
Right.
and maintain it.
Minimally, but yeah.
Yeah,
Sprinklers,
yeah, I mean,
So
it-
we can
You
price
get a
it.
Say
new
in my
cheap-
industry, we
yeah.
build shells all the time,
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's so much cheaper to build the entire
oh, yeah.
10,000, 20,000 square foot space and just outfit it as you need it.
Yeah, we've certainly done fire departments that are going from call to full-time in coming years, and we built a shelf for them all the
Yeah.
time. So we've done that before on several,
So
you
you're
know.
gonna get
fire-
asked that eventually, so you might just
Yeah.
plan for that.
And we can look at that, that's definitely one that we can build a shell and,
It wouldn't be long, it'd be a couple of
Yeah.
years maybe.
anything else on police and fire? Okay. David?
So unlike the police and fire facilities, which there's been a lot more input and sort of precision on the development of the program, the programming for the community center, we had a conference call with Andy, with Tanya. We've had a certain amount of input from the community, but it's largely based on community centers that have been built in similar-sized Massachusetts communities recently, community centers that we're currently working on. We're working with a lot of communities, having the same conversations. A lot of communities are really embracing the multi-generational community center vision rather than Council on Aging Senior Center. Also, everybody wants to rebrand Council on Aging Senior Center as Center for Active Living. A lot of communities are embracing that and this idea that it's not just, even if it's a senior center, it's not just at the senior end, but there's a lot of activities. So, your existing senior center facility is kind of like the fire station. You know, it's barely handicap accessible. It's way too small and not easily used for almost any of the real purposes. And there is a pretty common experience or phenomenon of the sort of field of dreams. If you really build a well-designed facility that has the programming that meets the needs of your community, subscription goes way up as soon as you open it. And so you have to build in that future capacity in the program. And so this number is complete. This has the shared spaces, the lobbies, well, obviously, it's not police and fire and shared in between, but it has the mechanical systems, the lobbies, all of the things that were sort of not in those separate programs. And it's really about the same size as multi-generational community centers that we are working on, that we have seen in similar communities. But all of the detailed programming remains to be done in real active work with the community involvement, and that would all be part of a future development process when this building is more in line and real. So it's a budgeting placeholder and it's a master planning placeholder about what is a 22,000, how much room does a single-story 22,000 square foot building take up on the site? How much room would it take up if it was a two-story building, so that we have the tools to look at site planning, master planning, pedestrian and vehicular circulation. As far as parking, you know, with the communities we work with, for senior center, often it's like 60 to 80 parking spaces. You know, they can very much be shared. You add these other uses, and we have to look really carefully at when the different uses are happening in the building and what the maximum is. And I think that with this town center concept, we're certainly going to be looking, master planning the whole site for shared visitor parking. I mean, obviously, police and fire have their specific needs. There's a staff for town hall. So we'll first budget for staff parking for all of the facilities. But we figure for this building, the staff parking may be 8 or something. So this is really all about all the people that come and go. And they may be the same parking spaces of the people that come and go to the town hall, or for outdoor uses, the trails. So the parking is definitely sort of a placeholder. Other communities with similar sized community centers are asking for more parking, as much as 120 parking spaces. Looking at the kinds of activities that will happen in the community center, there could be a demand for that many parking spaces. But again, some communities just, say, well, there'll be overflow parking. And, people will just pull off and park on the verge along the drive. And on those few days when that we don't want all of that paved parking, or we want tiered parking with a certain amount of it that's plowable, easily plowable and maintainable. The pervious paving systems are great from a environmental management and stormwater runoff standpoint, but they require more maintenance. You have to vacuum them to keep them functional, and they require more maintenance. They need to be plowed more carefully, and so that all remains to be seen in the future.
I have a question about the parking. Did that account for more handicap parking spots and maybe ride vans that might be dropping off that are larger than regular cars?
It's all included.
All included, okay.
The programming spaces, at this point, we've left them at different usable sizes with an assumption of having the larger rooms all be subdividable for multi-use. And one of the really interesting conversations in the future about programming is, to what extent do you really want to just focus on empty rooms with ample adjacent storage? The storage in community centers, the adjacent storage to these large rooms, it really pays to make it quite big, because you have not only you have tables and chairs, but to the extent that you've got rooms with cushioned floors for movement activities. You could have all kinds of things that you need those big storage closets for. You could even have spin cycles. You could have all, stuff that comes and a lot of mats and for the exercise equipment. But so that's one kind of room, which are generally multi-use and easily shifted around. But there's also a lot of programming that's a little bit more nailed down. So arts and crafts and those kinds of activity rooms often have large, heavier tables, work tables, maybe drops of electricity, storage racks for work in progress. There's sort of more stuff in some of those rooms. Music and sound studios are for recording, podcasts. Is very popular at all ages now, to be able to have recording not just for music but for podcasts and that kind of thing. So there are spaces that have equipment and are more structured. Again, all in the future. Staffing as well. We kind of know what the staff is for the Council on Aging, and the requirements for counseling, social work, private rooms for that. But there are a lot of add-on programs. We were, sort of asked to consider putting the food pantry in this building. But are there any other, as a community center, how much staff is there outside of the Council on Aging staff? And we don't really have data on that yet.
Going back to the parking, you were talking about the permeable surfaces. I don't know if you've considered this, but behind the Essex Tech garden center there, they've got, like pavers with grass growing through.
Yes.
I know that's fairly easy to plow, we've got that in front of our house. So I don't know if that would work for kind of like extra parking area that's also green when you don't need it.
Yeah,
And one other thing was maybe a sensory garden added, to, like, alongside the counseling. Because I know special ed kids, that's helpful for them to kind of help focus their senses and calm them down. Or even just plants that smell good. Boost stress.
Getting back to the pervious surface, are there laws mandating that they will have to be included if you build in Middleton?
there aren't any laws that a community can, I mean, you know, you can have, the town could pass bylaws for things like that, but there aren't building codes or state codes that require pervious paving. You know, stormwater management is, you know, there are state laws, but then that's a lot of town, obviously town regulation and town enforcement.
Yeah, Lance can answer anything on.
Yeah, so there's no laws per se. We have to manage the stormwater that's coming off of a site, and there's a number of ways to do that. Permeable pavement, permeable pavers, as you mentioned, those are a couple of examples of that. Especially as we get closer to the wetland resource areas, the laws get a little more stringent on, you know, how we treat the water, how we capture the water, and how much water can be released. So in those instances, you try to get a little bit more to go into the ground. Oftentimes, we put it through the pervious pavement, and oftentimes we use biofiltration and rain gardens, things like what we term as low-impact design. And, you know, it really helps capture the water before it moves on downstream.
This,
Is that, I don't mean to jump ahead, is that all right to go? All right.
no, go ahead.
Town hall, in the order, I didn't realize I stapled these wrong, but town halls, you have to back up one. So your town hall building, I think most people have been in that space. There's, you know, big empty rooms. There was a class one building at one point that, you know, are not well functioning. Even Andy Sheehan's office is overly large for one person and doesn't really function well as a conference room, or if other people need a conference, they don't have a place to do it. Becoming more and more important is people working at night and off hours, being alone in these buildings without any kind of sense of control. People being alone in this building at night, you know, this is a public counter with a door right next to it. They have mechanical problems, so they keep the door open as much as can to get the airflow, and that even makes the situation worse. So, this I met individually with every single department head, from both the land use people that are at the DPW right now and the business office folks. So the proposal is to bring all the land use people up to town hall so that they could better function in the business. So this has a lobby and a vestibule lobby area, and with public counters. So this is a spot where a lot of functions can happen. And what happens typically in a town hall is that there are high and low times of the day and of the week and of the month and of the year that people are visiting. So, you know, various times of the year there's a rush on X or Y or Z, and so you have a lot of people waiting, the need for multiple kiosk kind of areas for computers, you know, people getting permits first thing in the morning, you know, whatever. And so this reflects that kind of a size. And we heard a lot of different approaches to how this should be done, whether each department should have their own internal counter, you know, with locked doors versus one big space and locked door. And what we decided at this point in time is to have a centralized locker with the two sides having separate uses and counters, and sharing those counters. So that's where it stands right now. This has quite a bit more talking to be done, but just as David talked about as a placeholder, I think it's a good option for them. So just for people's knows, the administrative department has about 10 visitors a day, the treasurer has 12, the clerk at 20, the assessor at 5, public health 10, building inspector 18, planning at 2. So, just during the course of the day, each of those departments gets not interrupted, that's what they're doing, they're there to service the community, but they have those people. You could have all of those people at one time or throughout the day, so the space has been sized for that. And then they have, again, those peak times of the year. And then there are a couple that have night hours, so that's the need for control. Then the other part of it is all the business offices that are shared, conference rooms, a large census, IT, some swing space. You get auditors in at different times. People come in to do things. There's no space for those kind of people. Lunchroom, storage, copy mail, and archive records. That's 2,629. Then the business and land use, the actual offices, their file areas, bulk plan storage areas, 7,029. And then the building support of 3,193 for a total of 14,450 square feet and parking for 69 vehicles. The breakdown is here. There right now, there's equipment, the voting booth, the voting things all related to voting have to be locked down, record storage. They're trying to digitize everything, as the police and fire could potentially do everything digitized, but you still have to keep those paper records for a long, long time. So we're proposing in all of these buildings high-density storage systems to really pack in the files and get rid of all the boxes and cabinets and do that kind of stuff. So trying to provide the appropriate file areas because people can't be running down the hall or out, to get a file that they need currently, but putting all that archive together in locked areas. And you can see, the kind of stuff they're storing everywhere in spaces before, you can, it's just everywhere, and all, this stuff has to be locked down. So, and what would be normally an office space is really just storing voting booths and things like that because there's no place else to put it. Anybody have any questions about the future town hall?
So the administrative DPW, which is the building next to the electric company, those people in that building are going to join town hall?
The land use folks, yes.
Okay.
That includes the, I can tell you who they are. They're let me get, I have them separated
It's like the
here.
health.
Public health nurse, the public health inspector, the animal control officer, the conservation agent, the building inspector's offices and all the associated, town planning director's office,
Right.
and all their associated people in here. So the thought is to bring them up. Most of those people usually sit within a town hall. There's even talk about potentially the public health nurse's office and that stuff being moved to the community building. That's something that's been, that's where they do more work. That might be the more logical place, David, to have them. But you often see them sitting in town hall, having food, shop centers and things like that. So wherever the community would be best served. And there's things that are coming that, you don't have access to, like voting, early voting. They want to be able to do that right now. They can't do that. It's hard to do that in town hall, so they have to sort of move their base somewhere else, and that happens as people walk in at any hour of the day during early voting. Well, you can't, so we're trying to provide for spaces
Well,
like
and
that.
we had to move it to the library because it's
Right.
wheelchair accessible, and that totally disrupts
It's
everything we do at the library. So.
Right, so in their conferencing, for instance, we have essentially two conference rooms, one slightly bigger that would hold early voting, board meetings, public health, the Concom, elections training, so we size that for 30 people in seats. And then they have a regular conference room for day-to-day stuff, and they're constantly meeting. They meet with, people that come in needing, private conversations with the town. So there's a space like that. So we tried to do both of those and accommodate that need that's, it's current, and there's no space for that at Town Hall right now.
Okay.
So that's all in that 2,629 square feet.
Okay.
Anybody had a question?
I have a question.
I have to, I think I have to start.
Do you know the number on the current parking spots over at Town?
No, pardon me?
The current number of parking spots at Town Hall right now?
I do not know that. We can find that out. So this, again, this parking includes, excuse me, staff and staff parking, as well the vehicles, the town-owned cars that go home with employees, and then visitors and one mobile trailer. And that's how we get to the 69 vehicles, so. What's that?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment that one of the things this town lacks is meeting space for our committees.
Right, oh, yeah.
And I'm not sure what you proposed here is sufficient. Particularly where there's also a move to have all these meetings, videoed, either for live telecast or, replays.
Right. Well, we have the big, our proposals to have the very big community room at the fire station, the first one built. Then we have, potentially, if they're standalone, there would be 2 spaces. And then in the community room, David, I'm.
There's a lot of rooms of different sizes and also with subdividable partitions that are multi-use in the community building. And so I think, again, this kind of future programming is to what where do
Where
you
did the
want
things
all,
get- yeah.
where do you want to meet?
Well,
But do you?
My personal point of view, I served many years on the planning board, and we met here, and we had to bring all our files from up at 195 North Main Street here. I mean, it's a pain in the neck. It really is.
Do you see, would you?
And they're still doing it, many meetings still take place here, and everybody has to bring all their files with them.
Yeah.
They should be able to have a meeting where they're located.
So do you think we should build more, knowing that this is a yearly phase thing and it could be 15 years out before you get to Town Hall, and there'll certainly be 1,000 meetings before that building gets built, would you suggest building more into the first building to accommodate, like more meeting space? I mean, we can add that to the program.
I'm not sure the chief wants planning board
Well, I
meetings
think what
in his
George
building.
is alluding to is like, more maybe meeting space if the planning people are gonna be in this, say in this town hall building, have meeting space there, that's cable accessible.
Yeah.
So they can have
Well, we
meetings
have
there.
we have a big room, two rooms planned, but you're saying maybe an additional one.
Yeah, and because I'm assuming the selectmen are gonna be at town hall. So the selectmen are gonna meet every couple of weeks. and-
Well, multifunction rooms sound great.
Yeah,
The dissipative cost of moving the furniture in and out because the day use would not be the same as the meeting use. So there's a cost there of not having a dedicated room for meetings if it's gonna get that much use.
yeah.
That's what needs to be evaluated. Because there's a lot of potential economy in looking, because the seniors start early, and, and there's maybe a lot of overlap with the community uses in the afternoon. There's a lot of daytime use for adult fitness that often overlaps with, you can't, the seniors and the adult fitness, yoga, Zumba, that kind of stuff, often compete for the same spaces, so you can't double up that programming. But many of the uses that the seniors use, and even that the youth programs and those use, are available for evening meetings, for community meetings. And the government meetings, like planning board, are one set of those meetings. But then, for instance, when we were planning with Town of Lincoln, we talked to 30 community organizations that meet. And some of them meet in churches and, like this, but everything from the Minutemen, with their needed a place to store their colonial uniforms and their muskets, and they meet, and the garden club, and the this and the that and the everything. So there's all these different user groups that that can potentially, utilize these community facilities, and also that can be sort of feathered together into the schedule through the day, weeks and weekends, summer versus, school vacation weeks, regular weeks. It's all, and I think that the sequencing of the buildings also will give you time. In other words, if the community center is going to be built before the town hall, then you'll really understand what works in the community center for community meetings and what wants to be in town hall, and be able to really be precise about the program for town hall and the supplemental meetings rooms you need at that time.
But we haven't had a chance to talk to Andy about the 2 rooms that I came up with in the end. Like, one of them is bigger, 30 seats. That was planned for like the planning board and things like that. But whether there needs to be something in between that, I mean, I don't know how small committees are versus how big. They're all public. Anybody could come. I mean, this room is generously sized, more than you need for a meeting of this scale, but if you had 50 people in the audience, when we did the public meeting, we had to set up more chairs, and we were out of space. That room wasn't big enough, almost.
Right, but you could easily oversize one of those rooms, though, to accommodate this, too. I mean,
Yeah.
so you're looking at, would you say, a 30-seat room that was the larger of the two?
30, yeah.
I mean, that could be a 50 or 75
Yeah.
seat room if need be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
We have a
that's been done in other communities I've worked in. That we had our primary meeting room for planning board, conservation commission, held about 80 people.
80.
80
Okay.
was the number. Yeah.
So we can come up with a bigger room
Yeah.
for that, at
Yeah,
least.
that might accommodate it. I
Yeah,
think.
that might do it,
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on? Okay.
I just have some information that might be helpful. We got, I'm Pike Messenger for the Middleton Stream Team, and just a couple of weeks ago, a botanist went out there and inventoried all the plants in the area. We're particularly interested in the back 17 acres, and we'd like to see low-impact design, of course, everywhere you could. No curbs, roof gardens, rain gardens, porous paving, no lawns, bushes the birds like, that kind of thing. But I made copies of that inventory, and pass that up, please. And there's an aerial photograph on the back. I'm sorry it's not clearer, but I just mentioned at the last meeting about a development that's occurring nearby that has 13 acres of wetland, which we're asking for low-impact development there. The zoning board of appeals has approved it. If you look at the map on the back, you'll see a lot. It's the one in back of the golf course to the southwest. And it's 13 acres, so it's 13 acres plus the 17 or 18 acres of wetland conservation open space in back will make up 30 acres of.
Can I just interrupt?
Yes.
We're about ready to talk about the site.
Yeah.
You're,
We have
we're on
like a-
buildings now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
realize
we got a
that.
whole, I was just gonna say, we have a whole bunch of site
Oh, okay,
stuff.
I'm sorry, I
No, no,
thought
no,
we were at
that's-
the end, so.
Yeah, is that okay? Amy?
Yeah,
I wanted to, because I think Lance has a lot to say about all the things you're gonna talk about. The last programming piece I want to talk about is just, and we've been talking about this all around it, the site use, passive recreation, support areas for the community building, what is in that community building, and what kind of outdoor space will be associated directly with that. I don't know what that could be, the garden, bocce courts, seating area, whatever it is. Public gathering spaces were brought up a lot during the public meeting, and certainly during the visioning session. Dedicated spaces, and what I was thinking about with that was like the bandstand or a tot lot, things that were brought up at the meetings. And then the parking, which we talk about all night, dedicated to the building users and the visitors. So, can't see a massive parking lot of 200 cars anywhere. These are going to be broken up appropriately for the buildings. So I just wanted to make sure we covered that program. And with that, Bill's just gonna talk a little bit about the site analysis, and then Lance is gonna talk about the site. So I think if you guys hold your questions, you may see some things already covered in that. So Bill, you wanna?
Yeah, I think most of you, probably all of you know that this site, in many ways, is an amazing site. It's a great site to work on. It's got so many natural aspects to it. It has a lot of unnatural aspects, which was the golf course part. But in fact, for us, this is a really nice site. We don't have cliffs, we don't have ledge outcroppings, we don't have the kind of stuff that is just so complicated to work with. We do have wetlands, and we respect that, and we certainly have the most really gorgeous mature trees that we want to preserve as much as possible and integrate those into the plan. We have stands of trees which, again, if we can keep those, we will certainly do that. I think that there's view shed possibilities that we want to take advantage of, particularly in the passive area. We know we have zoning restrictions we have to deal with. We certainly have the 100-foot buffer around the periphery. And we also know that we need some kind of emergency access back to the passive area so that fire and police can get in there in emergency. We also realize that we want to be sensitive to neighbors about light spill from street lights, cars, and so forth at night. So those are the kinds of issues that we will be dealing with, and probably more, but those are the ones that we can kind of identify right now. And then we have, so this is the dividing line by deed between the passive and what we'll call the development area, which is where the buildings are going to go. Lance this is all wetlands. This lighter purple area is the buffer zone. The darker purple area is the actual wetland that's been flagged. This is a public water source that we don't have to worry about. And again, Lance will get into that. I'm just giving a kind of overview. But I think that really what we want to do is, particularly back here, preserve the landscape. We certainly got the message. We know the stream team is very, very interested in what happens in this, and I think that they will be included in the planning of this. We also want to maintain this portion of the site that. But this portion of the site, I just want to be really clear, is one that, in many ways, it's beyond the scope of our master plan, in the sense that to really design and figure out exactly what that's going to be is really a project in and of itself, and one that should be happening soon. We can make recommendations as part of our master plan. We can incorporate ideas from the community, but it's primarily this front area that we'll be looking at, and that's the immediate concern. But we would like to see more thought and talk about the passive recreation area. So maybe with that, we'll turn it over to Lance.
So whenever we're doing these type of studies, the first thing we do is identify all of the constraints on the piece of property. Is it zoned accordingly? Are the buildings allowable in there? What are the wetland resource areas? Are there any other zoning restrictions? And so I'm going to walk you through a little bit about how our process goes. The total site is about 51.5 acres. It's all zoned as a residential area right now. In the zoning regulations, municipal facilities are allowed in all the zones in the town. So they would be allowable in this, on this property as well. When the property was conveyed over to the town, it comes with a conservation restriction area. That is shown on the plan, indeed, on the plan as a 50-foot zone all the way around the site on the north and the west and the south, all the way around. Over here is South Main Street. So it's 50 feet all the way around, plus this large area in here. It's a relatively large forested area that outlines it pretty well. They have some, in the deed, they have some restrictions on what can and can't happen in that area. No buildings, no pavement, no parking, no utilities, no solar. There's a number of other things that are kind of related to this, but these are the big ticket items, and everything else is kind of similar. There are some things that are allowable in the deed by permission only, and that permission is by the grantor, the previous property owner, is the way that I interpret that and read that. But some trails and signs, and obviously some wildlife and vegetation management in there to try to make sure that it doesn't get overgrown and cause any significant problems. There's also two other areas that they term passive recreation, Area B and Area A. Combined, they are 13.2 acres in that back part. Very similar restrictions, no buildings, no pavement, no utilities, no solar. One major difference is that they have some things that are allowable, not necessarily by permission, but are allowable for the use. Trails, signs, wildlife vegetation management in there. The intent is pretty clear in there on what can be used in this back, or what can occur in this back portion of it, really to be passive recreation out there. I mean, there's no athletic fields, there's no things like that that are going to be programmed in there, I would imagine. The next thing we take a look at, in addition to the 50-foot conservation restriction, and the town has committed to an additional 50-foot buffer along the north and the south areas. So this total is 100 feet from the property line. It's the 50-foot that's by deed and the 50-foot additional buffer that the town has committed to. We would imagine they have similar restrictions and allowable uses as the adjacent conservation restriction, no paving, no buildings, all of that. I will point out one thing here. The buffer in this area, we're going to take a look at where the fire station goes. There's a little jut out of the property right along South Main Street here. That causes this additional buffer to pop out here and then encroach into the site. One of the things that we're going to look at as part of our future work here is whether or not that needs to still stay as a buffer in that particular area only. And then we take a look at what are the regulatory areas that occur on site. Where are the wetlands, a number of ponds associated with the existing golf course. And then a lot of them are in the back portion of the site, and then there's quite a few that are on this front portion as well. We went out here and we took a look at the wetlands. The conservation agent came out at the tail end of that and kind of gave us a little confidence in where we were putting these flags here. So we're pretty confident that these flags, where they show here and what they represent, will be a constraint that will occur on the site. Associated with the wetlands themselves, the town has a 25-foot no disturb zone, and the state has a 100-foot buffer around there. In between the 100-foot and the 25-foot, development is typically allowed. However, you have to go before the Conservation Commission and file permitting, and that triggers some of the more stringent requirements that we were talking about earlier about how to manage that stormwater in there. There is one isolated wetland over here. What's the difference between these and this isolated? These ponds here, they are larger than 10,000 square feet, so they qualify by themselves as a wetland. but they're also hydraulically connected back to the rest of the wetland in here. They have some piping that interconnects these. So when that happens, the state calls that a bordering vegetated wetland. It is associated with the wetland area and then the area that is bordering that wetland. So that's how these are, that's how our wetland scientist has flagged those. And again, the conservation agent met us out there and is in general agreement with that right now. This golf course here has a public drinking water well associated with it. Currently, it has a Zone 1 and a Zone 2 wellhead protection zone. So we've showed that as a constraint on the property itself. However, there is public water available in the street out here. Some fire hydrants right on the street there. I imagine that our analysis is going to connect into that public water. When that happens, this well would be decommissioned and the regulatory requirements from that will go away at that point. And the last piece here is setbacks. We have setback along the front of the property. That's associated with the zoning regulations, 25 feet. And then we have setbacks along the side and the rear. All of those setbacks on the side and the rear fall within the conservation easement anyway. Really why it's not showing up on this plan here. So we wouldn't anticipate needing any encroachment there. When I talk about a setback, that is a building setback, right? So it's, you know, some driveways and other things may have to cross into there to access the site, but that setback is really intended for buildings themselves. And then topography. It's a pretty nice site. It doesn't have any topography that's, I think, going to be too problematic. You know, we're going to get into that a little bit on how that is going to be impacted by the design. But it's typical golf course undulation. You know, it's rolling hills, having to do with how they programmed out the existing holes. And there's a couple of low spots on the site that don't qualify as wetlands. There's one right up here that you get a lot of drainage to, and this pipe, there's a pipe that picks it up and takes it out to the street. There's another low spot over here with the same result. Because those are, they have pipes that are draining those, the state and the local conservation commission typically looks at those as stormwater management areas and not wetlands. So they don't qualify in those instances. So we don't anticipate those to be a significant issue other than trying to avoid them and or relocating the low spots as we need to. We're also programmed to take a look at the traffic. Our traffic engineers were out. It's a relatively low volume. Traffic is always funny because it's perception. You know, if you're driving on that street and you're stuck in that traffic, to you it's the worst traffic ever. But from our traffic engineers' perspective, it's relatively low volume. They've done a little research on the accidents. Only a very few accidents, and they're low in severity. So combining those two things there, tells us that the road functions pretty well out in front of the site. It's got sight distance is another thing that we look at. If you're pulling out from a new driveway onto the road, can you see down the road? In this case, I've got a north-looking view and a south-looking view. You can see a long way out there. You can see far enough out there that the vehicles traveling even at the speeds that they travel have enough time to come to a stop and to avoid a collision. The trip generation initially for the fire station is expected to be pretty minor. We have to take a look at whether or not a traffic impact analysis, which is a Mass DOT threshold, it would be required. We think that just for the fire station, it's not likely required in this case. The full build option will depend a little bit about how these things are fully programmed out and where we go. But we think that it may be required in that particular case. Our traffic engineer's initial assessment is that South Main Street appears sufficient to handle the existing traffic volumes, and we don't anticipate a lot of issues with the full build analysis there. The last thing I'll point out is that, you know, it's got one lane in one direction, one lane in the other direction, and you've got a dual left-hand turn lane down the middle. That functions pretty well for this type of a site. We don't anticipate having to make any major modifications at this time to allow for people to make that left a hand turn in, coming off of South Main Street into the property. Any questions?
Is that study done at multiple times of the day?
Yes, we do. They have a very specific requirement, how they go through the traffic. They do 24-hour counts, and they do some peak study counts as well.
Okay. Yes.
At the last meeting we had at the library, a couple of good suggestions, I thought, for that orange place along 114.
Here?
Paul Richardson suggested that the sidewalk be set back and there be a green strip between the road and the sidewalk, and then you could have a row of trees or lawn or something on there. I thought that was a good suggestion.
Right, so we would see the rolling hills on both sides, right? Or at least there'd be green on both sides.
It would be green, it would be pasture on one side and then the green strip with maybe shade trees on the municipal building side.
The only challenge with trees in front of the fire and police stations is from an egress point of view, so we would study that. You want to be able to make sure that the fire department has good sight and everybody be able to see the fire trucks coming out as well from both points of view. But that's, entirely possible.
So because this graphic isn't super clear on here, we had it printed out on a board here that I'm just going to pass around. You can take a look at it. We'll have it here afterwards. Feel free to take a look at it and ask me a few questions.
Were those restrictions all clear to everybody? I mean, there's a lot of restrictions, but I think, shows what you
Our concerns on
back
traffic,
it the other way.
our traffic concerns really weren't in front of our traffic concerns really weren't in front of the property. They were for fire trucks attempting to get through the center of town where the old fire station is, and then turn, because there's really only 2 through streets in this whole town, and
Right.
you go through that intersection to serve half the town.
Right. Yeah, I know, Chief.
You didn't do any traffic studies in that area, did you?
No, we have not.
No.
No, that wasn't originally part of the RFP, but
Yeah, so you're talking about traffic study further.
Probably should be
in the
done.
town
Yeah.
center.
To go through that intersection.
Were traffic studies done farther down the road here in front of the school? Because I know when school gets out in the afternoon, it is absolutely standstill traffic.
Yeah, so as part of what they look at, they have a traffic counter that's counting those all times of the day. So they do factor that in, how much traffic is coming
My
out.
mom's one of the afternoon janitors here, so she has to come in like a full half hour to an hour early just to find a parking spot.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I want to say one thing, Lance, just because it doesn't look like the traffic, there could still be a traffic light that stops traffic included in this. I mean, could you speak to that?
I think that's a great point. Typically, a lot of fire stations have what we call a preemptive signal. So when they are exiting the apparatus bay, they push a button and there's a light out front that will stop traffic and to allow them to get to where they need to go. That certainly is something that we're going to take a look at, whether or not it's going to be required. We're going to take a look at that during this phase. Also, where the main driveway, if we have one single main driveway leaving the site with, that's serving all of the buildings that might be out there. Let's imagine that on here, we've got a couple of buildings back in here, and we have one main driveway aisle coming out there. That's something we're going to take a look at, too, whether or not a traffic signal would be what we call warranted, whether it would meet the warrants in order to happen.
I also want to point out the big green dots. Could you point, those were large caliber trees that.
Yeah, while we were out here on site flagging the wetlands, our staff, I had them go out and look at these really nice mature trees. I wanted them to GPS locate them so that we could plot them on on the site here, so that when we're going through this next programming phase for the site work, that we would certainly try to avoid those as much as we could. They took a look at the larger, kind of what we call specimen trees, really nice ones. There's a couple of groves of trees up in here that we feel show up on the aerial enough that we didn't necessarily have to GPS locate those.
They might be on your list, though, and that's why I wanted him to point that out. So, because I have a feeling that these overlap somehow, you know? so,
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah.
Pike, did you want to say anything else about
Yeah.
this sheet that you shared?
No, we're very interested in what's going on in the neighboring lot that I mentioned.
Okay.
And the fact that this wildlife area, passive recreation area, will be within 10 minutes of our two schools. So it could be a great place for field trips. And would be really neat to have a wildlife refuge within a few feet of the square, the center of town. It would be something different, as mentioned.
Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
that's really
this.
helpful.
It's really good information.
Yeah, we can share that with our landscape architect in particular. You know, we'll, you know, as Lance said and Bill mentioned, we'll, you know, the preservation of as much as possible. I'm gonna put it out there, we may not be able to save every blessed tree, plant, whatever, but we will certainly, you know, that'll be a decision we'll have to make. And the next phase, if you just advance it, we can come back to this slide because I think that's more important, but I just want to go to the next step. What we'll be doing next is developing our concept schemes that work with all the information that we've heard tonight, the sizes of the programs, the limitations of the zoning, the setbacks, the trees, the wetlands, all those pieces. We'll be doing that internally. We have that scheduled as an internal process for us. We'll be presenting that to the committee at the follow-up meeting. After the committee has had a chance to comment on those and express whatever they think about that, then we'll be having the community workshop following that on, I believe it's November 16th. And that will hopefully, you know, more opportunity for the community to interact with the comments that the committee has made and that the team has put forward. And then we'll have a survey. So I did want to tell you what's happening and what we'll be doing with all this information over the next few weeks. That's what we'll be doing.
Yeah, we haven't designed a thing. We've just been gathering information.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is the next step.
Yeah, next step.
Is to start putting pencil to paper.
Right. And the programming, like, I know that, you know, people will still want to comment on it internally. It won't affect too much the size of the buildings from a planning point of view, whether the building gets, you know, 5,000 square feet bigger or 5,000 square feet smaller, it won't greatly affect this next phase. So we'll continue to fine tune that as we go. And to your answer, the questions about whether it'll be a joint building or a singular building, we'll find that out too. We'll make a recommendation, so. We can go back to the site stuff if more people have site questions. I just wanted to let people know what we're going to do with all this stuff that we've been talking about for an hour and a half.
So one last thing that we would like to do, we gather the information, as Bill had said, we gather it from all the available resources that are out there. But there's some information that sometimes gets missed. You know, you folks are local here, you might know about a significant historical tree that has you know, we've run into this on a project site. There was a big tree that we had to save. Somebody had actually written a book about this specific tree and the history that it had with the town. So, you know, if there's anything else outstanding, we would, you know, it behooves us to understand that stuff now and not find that out as we progress down the path here. We like hearing that information. It really helps us refine the stuff that we need to do.
Pike, can you get me this in color? Do you have this in color?
I can. The Xerox doesn't do color that I used tonight.
Okay.
I'll email it to you.
Okay, would you do that? That would be great. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to.
So any other comments, questions about the presentation? Yes.
The fire station, is that gonna be a drive-through or a back into? do you
Haven't
know?
designed it yet.
Yeah, we have, yeah.
I just was curious, 'cause I know.
And I think I've explained this before, but I'll explain it again. It's not really a drive-through so much, it's really back-to-back equipment facing different directions and moving in different directions. So it's not like a pumper drives in and comes out, and so it's facing out. It's more towards how they operate. It could be a drive-through, but most of them end up being back-to-back equipment.
If every bay was a drive-through, it would probably be 12 bays.
Yeah, it would be enormous, just enormous. It'd be, great potentially, but not real practical. And this gives them more opportunity to have, fire departments set up their frontline equipment by how they respond, or if they have ambulance, whatever, and it's completely dependent on how they want to operate, and where the living quarters are, and where the support spaces are. And then that gives them an opportunity to put that second line of equipment that might not be as obvious, that goes out every call into the back spaces, so that's why they're not trying to.
Yes, George?
Yeah, just for the committee's benefit, the town of Groveland has a complex very similar to what we're talking about here, where they have a fire station up front, and behind it, attached, is the police station. But also on the lot is the town hall, the library, and in the back is the housing authority. So, if you get a chance, just to drive by and take a look at it, give you an idea of what.
Which town is that?
Groveland.
Groveland.
Yeah.
Great.
And also, if you're talking about the preemptive traffic lights, the town of Danvers, in front of this fire station on High Street, there's a light that goes on when the trucks go out. And North Andover up on 125, the same situation. In front of their headquarters, there's just a red light that goes on when the trucks go out.
Yeah.
Chief, are your signals?
That's what we have now. When we exit the building, we have a mirror that it's a night thing to have that.
Yeah.
Are the signals in town, are they on
They're all required to have the preemptive.
So,
Yeah, but these two lights that I talked about aren't traffic lights. They're just red lights when needed.
Like flashing.
Yeah, yep.
I would say that if we do that, I know in Danvers, they just put up decorative traffic lights. I think that would look nice. Black decorative lights, traffic signs. Fine.
Yes.
Janet, the last community meeting, I don't know if this is the forum to discuss this, but we talked about the design of the buildings, and you said you'd taken a look at the architecture of Middleton, and quote, we had no style. We had no sense. Struck me as funny, but.
But those singular style, I said, those singular style.
We got a lot of
Particular.
style.
We have a lot of style, yeah.
Okay, well, and some of us were talking about, well, what about this colonial period style that SD Taverns and Paul brought into the center? Flint Library is beautiful, the way they incorporated the old design into the new. Could you just touch on that for the committee?
Well, that, somebody, we were just talking about it, and I think it was just saying that, you have flat roof buildings, you have pitch roof buildings, you have clapboard buildings, you have brick buildings, you have stone, you have a mix of materials. There's no one distinctive style. That's why I say no distinctive style that someone would say that is Middleton. The library is probably perhaps the most distinctive building in town because of the age. And then I tried to explain about the scale of these buildings are much different than the smaller buildings that some of these towns had. Like, I was saying that a fire station floor-to-floor height is 23 feet nowadays. That's an enormous floor-to-floor height, and so the scales of the building are very different. So I talked a lot about that. I think that's what I was trying to go for, that, these are not small, quaint buildings that are going to be, sort of plopped down. These are much bigger scale buildings. So we'll work with those. We haven't settled on anything. I think we were hoping that everybody would just be very open-minded about what they could be. There's no, it doesn't have to be flat. I mean, I have worked in towns where, 50% of a committee has said it has to be a flat roof building. And the 50 Friends said it has to be a pitch-roof building, and they have very, there's, you can hear lots of different things, so I don't think we've even gotten that far yet. As Bill said, we haven't designed a single thing yet, so, yeah. And ultimately, the town will decide, we're gonna put out, not directives, but ideas about how all the buildings will work together, in the future, because we certainly hope on one campus, the buildings would, have similar but not exact the same architectures. Who knows? So that's a process still going on. Does that help you? Yeah.
Good to keep it in mind
Yeah.
as we go.
Yeah. I mean, this building we're in is, has a style that's very different than the library, and very different than Town Hall, which was a school, but tiny scale, tiny project. So.
We just had a couple other small agenda items to move us along, unless there's any other questions about the presentation. That was great. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so we have the Pumpkin Festival coming up on October 26th, which is this Saturday. And Bill, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but you had offered to help.
Sure.
I don't know if that was
Yeah,
still an
it's still on the
option.
yeah, I'm already gonna be there, so. I
Okay,
mean, if
does
we wanted to-
anybody, is anyone interested in helping to co-run a table with Bill to kind of get the word out and get people interested and engaged with what we're doing?
Don't jump all up at once.
Don't jump all at once.
Unfortunately, I'm already committed to apple pie and ice cream.
Okay.
There you go. But some materials would be great, from you guys, obviously. Something, anything, survey, something to.
What would you, I mean, if you've seen a lot of stuff we've showed so far, is there anything
Yeah,
there
I mean,
that kind of
the
piques your
board would be useful, I mean, for sure, for one.
that's a
Just
great
just the
idea.
board,
Could
the
we
board
borrow
that
your
you have
board?
here, I mean, that would be useful.
Yeah.
Because
The
I mean,
Oh,
I don't
the
think a lot
board,
of,
the
yeah, I
mat?
don't think a lot of people understand the
Oh, I didn't even
constraints
see
on the
that.
site
You know what,
that
that
we're
would be
already-
You win the board.
Sweet, there we
Is that
go.
okay, Lance?
Get an engineer
What
aboard,
does this
right? You
have
can
on
talk
it?
for
I've
days.
got something underneath that, so I gotta take a look and see.
No, no
if we
worries,
got-
understood, understood. But you could even just, even if you email it around, I can print out a big board.
Yeah, okay.
Could you share your presentation with us and maybe?
Oh, sure.
I mean,
I mean,
I
all of
could
this-
help you.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like,
notice.
even like a written or something for like a survey for people that, I know that we've done this a couple of times already with our group and then with the, obviously the last public meeting, but something that they could either, allow people to take something and provide information back to us, just anything that you could think of that you might have used in other similar scenarios. So basically, what it is, one of the school opens up and, here, and a bunch of kids are coming with all their parents, and usually there's a few tables in the back that, depending on what issues are going on in town, that, people can get information on, or, I know we're very early on, so I would
Maybe a
think it'd be more.
description of what the purpose of the committee is.
And the dates for our
and the dates,
upcoming
and the
public
dates.
meetings.
That would be great.
That would be great.
I just thought it might be an opportunity to garner some more feedback too, so if you had even some small little handout
Right.
survey that they could do, or a Survey Monkey created, or anything like that might be helpful.
We're
just
gonna
so-
do
And when is
that,
that?
and I
Is
think,
that
and then we're gonna
Saturday?
have this
No, let's-
community
let's
workshop
build
where
something
people
off.
can come
We'll see
and
what
really
they have. I mean, I get a sense.
participate, so, yeah, we're hoping there are lots of opportunities.
There's a lot of images here that,
I think we've said from the beginning, we need to get the word out. So there's a lot of people coming through the town for starting, I forgot in the morning. I was thinking the nighttime.
No, I'm thinking the morning
When
one.
we're just
Yeah.
scooping ice cream and apple pie.
Right.
We want to be handing something out,
Yeah,
so we've
my
got all
wife's
day.
slinging the pie as well, so she's already gonna be there too, so it's a.
Here?
Great, yeah. Yeah.
That's, okay.
Yeah.
What time is the apple pie?
6 o'clock.
Okay, so then the next thing is Andy had said that we're having our special town meeting on November 5th, which is unrelated to this. However, the Board of Selectmen would like us to give a short presentation, couple of minutes. So is there any committee member that is interested in helping? Andy does not want to be the face of that. He wants it to be any of us.
Isn't that the chairman's job?
I'm out of town then. I'm out of the country.
I have no problem doing it. I just would like to know if anybody else wants to participate.
I'm happy to help you.
All right.
All right.
Fabulous.
Sure.
Annie?
Yeah, I'm happy to help
Okay.
you. I just want to, I don't want to stand up.
Oh, so you'll help with the behind the scenes.
I'll sit right next to you and support you.
It'll be a quick one.
Yeah.
But just
Yeah, I mean, I
again,
don't-
we should hopefully get, some good people there, right? A lot of our town people will be there. It's a great
I don't know.
opportunity.
I hope.
Well, there should be. Okay, so those, and then just upcoming dates, so everybody's aware. Like Janet said, we're meeting next November 13th, which is a Wednesday. That's our next Master Development Planning Committee meeting. And then the 16th is that Saturday meeting where we're going to be doing the charrettes. I don't think we decided on a time frame yet.
No, I didn't know what time you wanted to. you
Yeah, we're
guys
kind
wanted
of
to
hoping
decide.
you'll tell us.
Oh, okay. Did anyone have a preference? I just think we have to be careful of lunch.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we can't have it over lunch and then not serve food. So we're either
Right.
like, I feel like we're either,
9 to 1 or something. or
so
9 to
is it more of
7.
a drop-in? Or do
Uh,
people come and stay for the
I-
whole thing?
I
How
think
does it?
people, usually if people actually participate, they stay for the whole thing.
Okay,
No,
They
it's not a
come in,
drop-in,
we give
yeah.
them,
It's not a drop-in, okay.
we're gonna, the way, we can do it any way you want, but what we'll do is we'll come up with these concepts and we'll
We should
provide.
talk about that when we get together for our
the-
charrette.
Whoever shows up, the same kind of information we're working from, the size of the buildings, the restrictions, and let them try to plan out what they think would be an ideal thing, and then present it to their, whoever shows up, and then we can learn from that. They might have some really good ideas, things we missed. Sometimes it just helps people understand better what we're doing, and so they can, accept it more. So it depends on how many people show up, and then you form groups. So I don't know if you have 5 people show up or you have 50 people show up, it could be a very different thing. So I don't know how you're reaching out and getting people for that.
we'll start on Saturday with a flyer at the
That's
Pumpkin
the idea,
Festival.
right?
So I think we need a time frame. Just
Yeah, a couple hours.
a couple hours?
Yeah.
Like 2 or more?
I would say 2 to 3.
2 to 3?
2 to 3?
2 to 3 o'clock, or you're thinking?
No,
2
2 to 3
hours?
hours.
hours.
So I was
That's
gonna
a
say
lot,
9 to
3,
12.
3 hours, that's a long time, no?
Okay. 10 to noon?
Well, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
We're having our own, the design team's having our own internal charrette next week, where we're going to really start planning and coming up with ideas and looking at things. Why don't you, and one of the things we'll talk about is the workshop, and I think we'll be better suited after that to say, okay, now how can we integrate the community in looking at this stuff and participating? I think that would be better.
Yeah.
So we'll wait to hear from you?
Yeah,
Well, they
we'll get
have-
back
I mean,
to
I think
you.
they have to schedule it. You have
We
to-
just
you have to
wanted to know
schedule
a
it.
time frame so we can
I
let,
would say after lunch.
after lunch.
I mean, I think.
Or morning, it's really, your
Or morning.
community.
Well, yeah.
When are people gonna wanna show up?
Well, some
and-
people like to run errands, whatever,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, we can do it either. I was just thinking morning, you get it in, you do it, you're done. You
I
move
think
on.
so, I think you get good I think, 10 to 12, 9:30 to 11:30, try to
Yeah.
get people in and out.
In and out.
all right.
I think too, it's hard, because of when you have a crowd, it's hard to get started on time. 90 minutes of scheduled time is tight, because you don't get 90 minutes of work time. And so I think if you book it for 2 hours and we shoot to get people out 15 minutes early, and work for 90 minutes. It depends on how many activities how much, because you have some presentation time. What we usually like to do is a couple of interactive activities.
Yeah.
Get the people, do, and then breakout groups, there's a lot of stuff we can do. We can easily fill up 3 hours or all day, but, for where this process is now, probably an hour and a half of work time, 2 hours on the clock or whatever is probably.
That's what I was
Okay.
saying too, figure, getting people started under, they're gonna have to do things in scale somewhat. We'll try to help them through what that means, by creating the pieces so they don't try to decide what a building of 20,000 square feet looks like.
Okay.
We'll tell them how to do that.
We'll build up to a longer one when we're doing when we're really getting into building planning and.
Yeah.
And do we have space reserved, do you know, or is that
I thought
something we
Andy
need to
said
do?
it was at the library.
At the library? Okay.
I think that's what I heard.
That sound right to you? Okay. So, I think morning would be I would
9:30
recommend
to
either
11:30?
9:30 or 10,
Yeah.
start time,
Yeah, sounds good.
10 to noon.
10 to noon, okay.
10 to noon, that's what we're going with?
Okay, great. So that is Saturday, November 16th, 10 to noon. And then we have December 2nd, December 4th, and December 11th. That's all of our upcoming meetings and public input. And just as a side note, I don't know, Frank, if you've been enlisted in this one yet, but the kindergarten, one of the kindergarten teachers and our art teacher want to do a project-based learning, like a 6-month unit. And so Andy and myself, and I thought he was grabbing you, but it doesn't sound familiar yet. And I believe David.
David Eisen. Yeah,
Yes,
the other
had
David.
volunteered to help to talk about shapes with the kindergartners and then have them build out what they think our community should look like. And then Bill and I and Andy are meeting with Barbara Dealey, who is doing an innovation, like a STEM innovation class with the 3rd through 6th graders, and use her to access a lot of the elementary-based kids here, so we could pull their feedback into the design and things that they would like to see around the town as well. So any other ideas you guys have, or groups you want to reach out to, we can come up with however, we think the best venue, whether it's a discussion or a survey or a charrette or whatever. Just the more input, I think, the easier the process will be for us come March.
Well, and I was also approached by the 3rd grader, teachers of the 3rd grade, and they want to do a learning project that's going to be 3 months.
Awesome.
Related to this. And I'm supposed to meet with all 3 of them to kind of get a feel for what they're looking for from us. But like having the 3rd graders design a survey and then give the other kids in the school the survey, and then write on the bottom of the survey, don't forget to do the survey for the town to encourage their parents. Like, that's how we're trying to coordinate it, so that they're a motivator for their own parents for the things they're doing. So I'll let you know. I'm supposed to meet with them in the next 2 weeks, so.
Okay, we're meeting on the 6th if you want to join us.
Okay.
It's 3:15 to 3:45
Okay.
here on the 6th.
Okay.
So if that's easier, then we're all collaborating together. But either way.
Okay.
All right, great.
Can I just say, before we break up, has everybody signed the sign-in sheet? Have you all signed it?
So he needs to come down this way.
We even have a
Of all people.
Thanks.
All right, so our meeting is adjourned at 8:45. Thank you all.